Welcome to our nonprofit leaders today. We are recording on Zoom, so we'll have a little different format. I will post this recording later and welcome you to ask your questions later when you see the video. And then Jayden will get back to you and answer your questions, okay? So I would like to introduce our guest, Jayden Beatty, Director of Development for Age of Central Texas. Welcome, Jayden, and thank you for being here. Tell us a bit about Age of Central Texas and data and dollars.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy, so much for having me. Excited to be with you all today. So like she said, my name is Jayden. I'm the Director of Development for Age of Central Texas, which is a regional nonprofit that serves older adults and caregivers. I've been lucky enough throughout my career to see grant funding from two different sides. So at Age, we secure grant funding ranging from $5,000 to multi-million dollars for our capital campaign that we're in the midst of right now. But I've also worked for organizations that awards grant funding. So I've seen both sides, and throughout my time, I feel I've come up with some tips and tricks, or a formula, if you will, for how to utilize data effectively and how we're approaching grant applications and funders to try and grab their attention to support our efforts. So today I'm going to go over what those top 5 tips and tricks, steps, or formula pieces, if you will, that I've come up with that seem to work. But I will note that most of these are also applicable to individual gift solicitation and how you can utilize data to inspire individuals. So hopefully you get something great out of this. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you guys can see a little bit of a presentation I've put together for you. So Nancy, can you see my screen right now? I just want to double check.
I can. Looks good.
Perfect. Okay, great. So data and dollars. So we're going to go over 5 different steps today. First is define success. Then it's understand your data, know your funder, customize your description of need, and tell a story. So we're going to start with defining success. So here's the thing about funders. Most of the funders, especially in this area, meaning the Austin kind of region, are not experts in your field, meaning they probably don't understand the science behind what you're doing and how you're doing it. And so they're not subject matter experts on what you're doing. And so because of that, you define what success looks like for the funder. And that includes the data. So you have an opportunity to determine what good data is and what bad data is, because most of the foundations you're soliciting are made up of families who aren't going to know any more than what you tell them. So the first thing to know about data is when you're talking about success and what it looks like, and you're presenting data that you've determined to be a success indicator, that's up to you. And you need to be able to explain that that is what success looks like to the funder. And the way that you identify what success looks like for yourself and for your organization is by starting with your vision statement. So our vision statement, as most of us know, is that utopian end goal. The vision is what happens when you've solved the problem that you're focused on, right? And so the first step to defining success is to look at your vision statement and identify success words within it. So those key words that are the impact of being successful, right? And with each of those words, you want to ask yourself, how do I measure that? And you should have a data point for each word that you've identified. If you currently don't have a data point, then I highly encourage you to get together with a group of appropriate representatives in an organization to determine what that data point is. So that way your success and how you've defined it is directly linked to your vision. And because of that, it's directly linked to your mission, which of course we all know everything we do should link back to your mission. So that's the first step in utilizing data, is identifying what success looks like and what data or metrics determine that success. The next step is to understand your programmatic data. So this is a tricky one, and it's one that development staffs in particular are notorious for not taking as seriously as they should. I think there are a lot of development staff professionals who think that programmatic data is handled by the program staff. So as long as they give me the number, I'll put it in the application. I don't need to know anything else. And the fact is that's really just not true. Funders are experienced enough and smart enough to key questions about data. They may not know the science of what you're doing, but they know numbers, and they notice changes in numbers, and they notice, things that don't look quite right. And they're going to go to the development staff with those questions, okay? And they're going to want the development staff or the grant writer to explain the data in a way that is understandable to them. And the only way that a grant writer or development professional can do that is if they themselves understand the data that they're presenting. So the next step is making sure that you have that understanding and that you're not just regurgitating a statement that the program staff has given you, but you actually yourself fully understand the type of data that your organization is collecting. So that way you can explain it better in your writing. So the first step within that is to define your terms, okay? Your organization most likely right now does track certain sets of data. You need to understand what that data is and be able to define those data points. So I've listed a couple of key term examples that your organization might use. These are things like using the word client, using the word impressions, encounters. You should be able to define what that means for your organization. You should also be able to define how those data points are calculated, and that is a process that should be documented. If you get anything out of today, one of the key things is to make sure there is written down somewhere how you calculate your data. The biggest mistake that can happen for an organization, especially one that depends on philanthropic giving from a funder, is that they recalculate or change the way they calculate their data year to year. And so your funder is looking at drastically different numbers on your annual applications that don't correspond with each other. And funders notice that, right? Okay, so you don't want to do that. You want to have a consistent calculation method that you can easily explain, or when it does change, you can explain the difference and why those changes happen. You also need to be able to define short-term goals with your data, meaning what a successful metric is year to year. And you want to identify who is analyzing your data. So there should be someone in your organization, and I think it's great for a development staff person to be this person that looks at your data and makes observations. So these are things like, I've noticed over the 3 years that the number of clients we're serving in X program has decreased rather than increased, or maybe it's increased more than we projected. And that person can go to the program staff and ask for why, because those are great tidbits to use in your applications to explain what's going on with your programs, to go beyond the number, but give a justifiable reason why that number is the way that it is. Really what that comes down to is communication. A huge part of utilizing data and grant applications is having a really good relationship with your program staff. A development professional should really truly understand the programs and what the program directors are going through to effectively explain the data coming out of those programs. And the only way they can do that is if they communicate regularly. So my advice would be, if there are program staff meetings, have a development professional attend those meetings. And I think having the grant writer be that person, even better, because they're the ones that are going to be writing about those programs. So it's great to be in tune to what's going on with them. And especially in times like now where everyone's programs are continuing to evolve and change, and what you write in a grant application may drastically change to what you're reporting on. Having that grant professional there to be in tune with those conversations is so, so helpful, so that they can give really comprehensive reports to your funders. The other point that I'll make is there's a lot of tension between, fundraising staff and program staff, because there's a fear that funders are leading the work, meaning that you're making choices about what work your organization is doing based on what funders want to see rather than what the community needs. And that's a fair concern. And I believe that your clients should dictate your work. However, fundraising should influence data collection. The reality is, especially here in Austin, there are certain funders, and in fact, more and more it's becoming all funders, who are requiring certain data points to be considered for funding. And I'm going to direct your attention to these 3 bullet points at the bottom of the key term examples. It is no longer an option to collect demographic data for who you serve. You have to be able to explain the population you serve from a data perspective. Funders want to see that, they need to see that, and if you want to get funded, you have to be able to show that. So if you don't do that already, that's a first step for you, is you have to start collecting demographic data. Next is know your funder. This is one a lot of us know, but the thing is, if you're going to utilize data in an application, you need to know what data points are important to your funder. And you need to know if this is the type of funder that really understands your field and wants to see numbers and they're numbers people, or if it's a family foundation that wants to have their heartstrings pulled and wants to hear stories. You need to know the difference. And the best way to do that is to talk to the funder. A question I'll point out that I would suggest you ask that a lot of people don't ask is, what do you ask your grantees to report back to you? That's a great question to ask a funder, because whatever they're asking for in the report is the impact they as a foundation want to show that they've done by funding the community partners they've chosen. And so that means those are the data points you should be highlighting in your application. If they have a question in their report about diversity and inclusivity, then you should be highlighting the diversity of the clients you serve and the strategies around inclusivity that you have. Those are the data points you want to highlight in your application, because that's what they're looking for. So knowing what the reporting process and what the reporting requirements are is so helpful in figuring out what data you should use. The next thing I would say is a lot of organizations, due to lack of time, resources, or capacity, have a hard time collecting data. You have your programmatic data, but in terms of finding research that's applicable to strictly your community, it can sometimes be difficult. You can feel like the data is outdated, or you can feel like you're depending depending heavily on national-based data or statewide data. First thing is, there's nothing wrong with national or statewide data as long as you use it appropriately. The second thing is, part of the reason people struggle so much is because they don't collaborate as they should. The fact is, Austin is home to the most nonprofits per capita than I think the country, if not, one of the areas that have the most in comparison to other areas of the country, which means that chances are you are not the only organization serving the people that you're serving. You're not the organization providing the work that you're providing. You might be providing it in a unique way that no one else is doing it, but the people you serve are probably shared by other organizations, which means you should be collaborating to combine resources to look at data, to look at research. I mean, in fact, funders want to see that. If you're able to cite data from a community partner, it makes you look good because it makes you look like you're collaborating. So working together to provide shared data points that emphasize the need or the problem you're solving is actually very helpful to you. And I highly encourage you to reach out to community partners in the same work as you to ask if there's ways for you to collaborate on that. The next step is customizing your description of need. Your description of need is something you're going to be asked for in every grant application and a lot of times in every report. And you need to have a comprehensive answer to this that is not copy-paste, that is customized to your funder, and utilizes data points. This is the most appropriate place to use data when you're describing the need. So you want to handpick your data points for the funder based on what they're focused on. And you want to be able to use a mix of data. You can use national-based data, you can use your own data, or you can use a healthy mix of that, which I think is the ideal when there's a great mix. So I wanted to provide you guys with an example. So I came up with a fake organization. So this organization, which we will call fake organization, is a funder that supports low-income women with brown hair. And let's say that your organization provides childcare for low-income children. So you're applying for their support. This is an example of a description of need that I believe effectively utilizes a good mix of data points. So it says, according to the World Health Organization, 50% of women with brown hair say they struggle with finding affordable childcare. 1 in 5 of the women fake organization serves report that without our care, they would have to quit their job or reduce their hours, leaving them financially unstable. Access to affordable childcare is crucial to a woman's ability to keep food on the table for them and their loved ones. Fake organization provides expert childcare for free or at a sliding scale rate so that mothers are able to maintain their employment and in turn keep their family financially stable. 80% of the mothers we serve report that without the childcare we offer, they would be unable to keep their job and that their child feels safe and loved while with us. A couple things happened here. You picked a data point that was global, but specifically applied to the demographic or population that the funder was focused on. And then you weaved in your own programmatic data that may not just be applicable to that specific demographic. It may serve more people than just that small group of people, but it applied to the demographic that the funder was focused on. And so you weaved it through, you identified the need, and you also identified how your organization meets that need. That's a good description of need when it covers both. It explains the problem, but then lays you out to be the person solving the problem. And then using data within that just strengthens your ask. Lastly, we're going to talk about, Lastly, we're going to talk about telling a story. So storytelling is a great place to use data. But when you're telling a story, your focus is on heartstrings, right? So you don't want to weigh it down with data. You want to handpick a few pieces of evidence that really serve your story. So it's about quality rather than quantity. I would also say that quantitative data is not always the best form of data to use. Oftentimes qualitative data, which is more feeling based, is what you want to use for a story, or if there's a way that you can highlight both, that's even better. So you want to have gentle reminders in this story that this isn't a unique story, meaning there are thousands more in need, right? That's the whole goal of a story. So I'm going to really quickly read this example. I know we're about out of time, but here it is, assuming it's the same organization from the last slide. Annie is a brown-haired girl who was born and raised in Austin, Texas. At the age of 16, Annie became pregnant and was kicked out of her home. Since then, Annie has worked hard to provide for her family by obtaining her GED and working 50 to 60 hours a week. Annie doesn't have a family support system and represents the 80% of brown-haired women in the country who are dependent on childcare to keep their job and need an income. Annie's daughter, Julia, attends our 1 to 3-year-old class every day of the week from 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. While with Fake Organization, Julia has access to teachers especially trained to provide early childhood education in a warm, safe environment that Annie can trust. 95% of the mothers Fake Organization serve say they feel their child's teacher cares about their child and is invested in their safety and education. The childcare offered allows Annie to continue working so she can cover her monthly expenses, and because the care is offered at a rate she can afford, move beyond just getting by to achieving true financial stability that allows her to start saving and investing in her and Julia's future. So again, this is heartstrings. You're using data points that apply to the demographic the funder is focused on, while also providing a story that is relatable and qualitative data that is feeling based. The 90% of mothers Fake Organization serve say they feel. That's what family organizations especially want to know. They want impact that feels so that they can feel it themselves too. So those are some really quick steps for you. The thing about data is make it what you want. You define what good data and bad data is. So use it as you can and partner with others to identify data if you don't have a lot to work with yourself. So there you go.
Wow. Listen, I thought that was excellent. And towards the beginning, you talked about don't just regurgitate information from the program. And I was thinking of what we did last week about teams and working in teams. It would be really good if the development and the program people work together to develop even the measurement tools in the first place, so they understand what each is trying to do, what the priorities are for both of those sides of things, you know. So I thought that was really important, what you said there. And the consistency from year to year, oh my goodness. Yes, we could. You know what? I really think we do need to have a whole meetup on this topic. This was phenomenal. Let's see. And the communication, sometimes when I do meetups on grants, I talk about how people forget that funders are people too. And that even where you were talking about a situation where maybe something has changed in the program, like you're serving less people or more, but let's say you're serving less. I think one of the things I used to talk about is, you know what, there's nothing wrong if you got funding for that program with calling up the funder and saying, hey, I just need you to know something not so great has happened, and communicate that with them and your perceptions of what's going on. And they love that stuff. They love being communicated with. So I'm really glad you brought all that up. There was a lot of notes I tried to take on this little tiny piece. So what we'll do is when I get this link today from Zoom, I will pull it up and then download it to my computer and then upload it to YouTube, and then I'll have to place a link into the group. Meanwhile, I have to Google that message that I got, that horrible, scary message that I didn't have permission to do this because we've been doing it for months now. So I will try to figure that out before our next live meeting. But hey, I really appreciate what you did today. And let's keep that dialogue open about doing a meetup on this eventually.
Yeah, I'd love to. This was fun. It was nice to think about it. And I think this is just a great topic that you can really dive into with so many people. And there's always room for improvement when it comes to data collection, I think. So
Exactly.
it's relatable to everyone, I think. So thank you for inviting me and having me.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to hit end and see how this works for later. And I'll let you know if I see any comments later on after I post this. All right. Thank you, Jayden.
Perfect. Thank you. Bye-bye.